let's get divorced. Sun Yenjo stood in the center of the living room and threw the string of mansion keys onto the coffee table. He didn't even sit down, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He looked as if he had just stepped down from an operating table. Exuding impatience from head to toe, he said, "This mansion is yours. It's worth 38 million. Enough for you to live on for the rest of your life. Sign it." I sat on the sofa and looked at him. There was someone standing behind him. No, she hadn't come in, but I could see the slender shadow at the doorway. She was wearing pink nurse's shoes with a strip of white socks showing. The female intern, Lin Siki, had just turned 24 this year, 8 years younger than me. Seeing that I said nothing, Sean Jojo added, "Siki is pregnant, 2 months along. I need to take responsibility for her." He said it so righteously, as if cheating were some kind of virtue. I lowered my head and looked at the set of keys on the coffee table. A luxury mansion, 38 million yuan. He was the deputy chief of surgery at the hospital with an annual salary of less than 800,000 yuan. This mansion had been bought by his father years ago and registered under San Yenjo's name. Now he was bringing it out as divorce compensation, generous as if he were granting alms. I reached out and picked up the pen. Sean Jojo visibly froze for a moment. He probably thought I would cry, make a scene, smash things, and question him about what that female in turn had that was better than me. He may have even already prepared his lines like, "You're too domineering. You only know how to work, or you don't know how to be considerate." But I said nothing. I opened the divorce agreement and read through it page by page. The division of property was written clearly. The villa belonged to me, and the rest of the savings and the car belonged to him. There were no children, so there was no need to fight over custody. Simple, clean, like an informed consent form for surgery. I signed my name on the last page. Shinli San Yenjo's Adam's apple bobbed. He clearly hadn't expected it to happen so soon. "You don't want to check the property deed?" he asked. I pushed the signed agreement back and said, "I've looked it over. What's mine? I won't give up even one bit. What isn't mine? I won't take even one extra square meter." I stood up, picked up that curing, and walked past Sun Yanho Lin Siki at the doorway, quickly stepped aside. But she still couldn't help glancing up at me, and her eyes was smugness, provocation, and a sense of superiority that said, "I won." I stopped and turned my head to look at her. She was wearing a small Chanel jacket, clearly brand new, with the tag not fully removed, a short white string still showing. Seen Jojo had bought it for her with my money because just last month I had transferred my 300,000 yuan year-end bonus into the family account. I said Liniki, right? Her face flushed slightly and she said softly, "Hello, dear Shin." I smiled. I looked very good when I smiled because I knew that I said the keys to this mansion are in my hands. If you want to move in, you better ask me whether I agree first. Liki's face instantly turned pale. Sean Jojo frowned and said, "Shindy, don't make things hard for her. The agreement has already been signed and the house is already yours." I said nothing more and turned to leave that night. I returned to my real home, not that mansion, but the old house my mother left me. When my mother passed away back then, she left me a courtyard house in the 3rd Ring Road area worth over 100 million yuan. Sun Yanjo didn't know about this because I had never told him. During these 5 years of marriage, I had always pretended to be an ordinary obstetrician gynecologist, earning 18,000 you on a month and with bonuses barely 30,000. I thought being low-key was a virtue, but only now did I realize that being low-key only makes men think you're easy to bully. I walked into the courtyard and threw that string of mansion keys onto the stone table. Then I carried out a cardboard box from the study. It was very heavy, and inside were all printed 4 sheets, neatly bound in stacks one after another, a total of 327 academic papers, all written by me, all bearing Senyanjo's name in these 5 years. his ability to gain a foothold in a top-tier hospital, to be promoted to associate chief physician and to become deputy director of the department did not depend on his scalpel, but on these papers. I worked through sleepless nights digging up, compiling data, writing reviews, and submitting to journals. Each one was like laying a brick for him, step by step, building him up to where he is today. He thought that was what I was supposed to do. He thought I was naturally meant to revise his drafts late at night, help him come up with new ideas, and handle the difficult questions from journal editors. For him, what he didn't know was that I kept backup copies of the raw data for every paper, and I had records of the writing timeline for each article. If he dares to tamper with the divorce agreement, I can make him lose everything and ruin his reputation overnight. But I didn't do that, not because I was generous, but because it wasn't worth it. I carried the cardboard box to the middle of the courtyard and picked up the lighter. The first sheet caught fire. The flames licked at the pages and black ash drifted up. The second, the third, stacks and stacks of papers were thrown into the fire, crackling and popping. The firelight reflected on the blue brick walls of the courtyard house like a giant shadow. I didn't cry. I squatted beside the fire and burned them one page at a time for a full 2 hours. When I got to the last page, I reached in, flipped it over, and watched the name Sean Jojo on it be swallowed by the flames. The ink darkened first, then curled up, and finally turned to ash. These 5 years, I burned them away. Sean, do you think giving me a mansion can make up for these 5 years? You underestimate me too much. 3 days later, you'll know what real consequences are. The next morning, I went to the hospital to handle my resignation paperwork. It wasn't because I was heartbroken. It was because I had long since stopped wanting to stay in this hospital. The courtyard house my mother left me, I planned to renovate into a high-end private obstetrics and gynecology clinic. I had the skills, the qualifications, and the funding. There was no need for me to remain in the public hospital and keep running into San Yanjo. After finishing the paperwork and coming out, I ran into Sinjo in the hallway. He was wearing a white lab coat and talking with the department director. When he saw me, his expression visibly froze for a moment. I walked over and greeted him. "Doctor, Song morning." He lowered his voice and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here to handle my resignation." He froze for a moment. "Quit? Are you crazy? You've worked at this hospital for 6 years, and you finally got promoted to associate senior. Why would you resign?" I smiled. "For no particular reason. I just want a change of environment." The department director, who was standing nearby and had heard us, said with a look of pity, "Dr. Shin, you'd better think this through. Your medical practice documentation is still with the hospital, and your credentials are enough to qualify you for the senior title. It would be such a waste to leave now." Sinjo's face changed color at once. Of course, he knew what I was talking about. That medical practice document was another important piece I had written for Sean. It recorded detailed data from all of his surgeries over the past 2 years, including the true details of several medical incidents. That document was not a paper. It was his leverage, and he had begged me to write it because he simply couldn't write it himself. And the original copy of that medical practice document, 3 days ago, I had already handed over through an intermediary to his arch rival, the other deputy director in the general surgery department, Xiao Xuan. Xiao Xuan had always had his eye on the department head position. All he lacked was evidence that could bring Cyanha down. Now the evidence was in his hands. I said to the department director, "It's okay. I've already handed the medical records to the person they were meant for." Sean Yenjo's face turned completely pale. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his voice trembling. "Shinling, what do you mean? Who did you give the records to?" I looked down at his hand, gripping my wrist, and pried his fingers open one by one. I said, "Sean Jojo, didn't you want a divorce? Didn't you want to take responsibility for her? Then go ahead and take responsibility properly. As for the paperwork, that's your problem, not mine." After saying that, I turned and left. Behind me came Song, Yanja calling my name, but I didn't want to look back. That afternoon, the Zhao Xuan handed the medical practice document over to the hospital's disciplinary inspection team. Shan Jiajia's 2 recorded medical incidents were dug up. One was that he cut the wrong place during an appendectomy. The other was that he failed to handle a post-operative infection in time, causing the patient to be transferred to another hospital. These matters had originally been suppressed, but now they were laid out in black and white. Sinho could forget about ever becoming department director. As for Lin Siki, things were even more dramatic. My classmate, who served as a mentor at the university, directly flagged her physician qualification exam as suspected cheating. She had failed it 3 times already, and this time, even her score wasn't released. It went straight into the investigation process. Without a medical license, she couldn't even be an intern doctor, let alone become a full-time employee. Sei Yanzhou thought he had picked up a young and beautiful woman, but he didn't know that this woman didn't even have the most basic professional qualifications. This was his retribution. 3 days later, Sei Yanzhou blocked me at the entrance of my family's courtyard house. His white coat was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept for 3 days. The moment he saw me, he lunged over, his knees buckling, nearly dropping to the ground. "Lingy, please," he said, his voice so horsero, it was hardly recognizable. "Can you withdraw that document? The disciplinary inspection team is going to hold a meeting to discuss my punishment. My director position is gone. I've lost everything." I leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. This man who once said to me, "Siki is pregnant. I have to take responsibility for her," was now kneeling before me like a stray dog. I said, "Sono, don't you still have that luxury mansion? 38 million should be enough for the rest of your life." His face twitched. I continued, "Oh, right. I forgot to tell you something. That mansion, when your father bought it back then, he used a bank loan with the equity of your father's company as collateral, and the largest creditor of that company is me." Shan Jojo widened his eyes. "What did you say?" I said, "The inheritance my mother left me is enough to buy your father's entire company." "Shanzhou, do you think what you gave me was a mansion? What you gave me was a mortgaged house that's still being paid off." His lips were trembling. I bent down, looked into his eyes, and said each word deliberately. "3 days ago, when you made me sign the divorce papers, did you think you were something special? Did you think giving me a mansion was the height of generosity? Sinha, listen carefully. You are about to lose your job, your house, your reputation, and the woman carrying your child because the mother of your child can't even pass the medical licensing exam. She can't even support herself." Sen Yanzhou collapsed limply onto the ground. I turned and walked into the courtyard, closing the door. His heart-wrenching cries came from outside the door. Leaning against the door panel, I looked up at the sky above the courtyard and let out a long breath. "Chini, you did very well. This is only the beginning." Chapter 2. The mistress's mansion dream shattered. Lin Siki thought she had one. She was packing her luggage in Sun Yanji's rental apartment, stuffing all the valuable clothes from his closet into her own suitcase. As she packed, she called her best friend, her voice so loud that the whole building could hear it. "I'm telling you, Sei Yo gave that mansion to me. The standalone villa in the east of the city. The one worth 38 million. Her best friend's surprised voice came through the phone. "Really? Didn't he say he gave it to his ex-wife?" Lin Siki let out a cold laugh. "Gave it to his ex-wife. That was just for show. Shan Jojo said that once the divorce paperwork is finalized, he'll transfer the house into my name." What is that old woman anyway? Letting her stay there for 2 days was just to let her enjoy it. When she said this, San Yanzhou had just come back from the hospital. His complexion was awful with 2 huge dark circles under his eyes. He didn't even change his shoes when he came in. He just collapsed onto the sofa. Liniki leaned over and cooped. "Yanhao, when are we moving into the mansion?" "I can't wait. I've already thought it through." I want to paint the master bedroom pink and put a crystal chandelier in the living room. Sean waved his hand irritably. Don't make noise. Let me have some peace. Leaky pouted, unhappy, but she didn't dare lose her temper because she knew Sean was in a bad mood right now. The hospital's disciplinary inspection team was investigating those 2 medical malpractice cases, and Xiao Xuan, that bastard, was fanning the flames in the hospital every day, but she still couldn't help asking, the keys to the mansion. Your ex-wife didn't give them back to you. Shanzhou said nothing. Linny went on, is the property deed still with you? We can go straight to the housing authority and transfer it without her consent. I checked. The divorce agreement says the house belongs to her, but as long as she hasn't transferred it, you can revoke the gift. Shan Zhou suddenly sat up glaring at her. You checked. Who told you to do that? Liniki was startled by his reaction and shrank her neck. I was just asking. Shan Zhou took a deep breath, stood up, and said, I'll take you to see that house, but don't get your hopes up too much. Shinli isn't that simple. Lin Siki didn't understand what he meant, but when she heard they were going to see the house, she immediately jumped up with delight. Early the next morning, Lin Siki specially put on that Chanel jacket and applied delicate makeup. She also wore the diamond necklace Yanha had given her, although it was only 0.3 carats. She felt it was already enough to show off. Sinho drove her to the villa district in the east of the city. That mansion was enormous. It had 3 stories with a garden and a pool. The exterior walls were covered in beige marble, and 2 rows of plane trees lined the entrance. Linsiki stood before the row iron gate, her hands trembling with excitement. It's so beautiful, she cried. Yanhao, is this really ours? Shan Jojo didn't answer. He pressed the doorbell. The door was opened by a middle-aged woman wearing a housekeeping company uniform and holding a tablet computer. Who are you looking for? The middle-aged woman asked. Sinho said, I'm looking for Shininji. The middle-aged woman glanced at the tablet and said expressionlessly, MS, Shin doesn't live here. This house has already been entrusted to our company for management. Ms. Shin is the owner, and without her consent, no one is allowed to enter. Lin Siki became anxious. What do you mean? Trustee management. I'm Sean. This house was mine in the first place. The middle-aged woman glanced at the tablet again. Saying, the records show that according to the divorce agreement, this house belongs to Ms. Shinling. Do you have a mess? Shin's written authorization. Linsiki stamped her foot in anger and took out her phone to call Shininji. But after searching through her contacts, she discovered that she didn't even have Shinling's number. Seen's face turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. He took out his phone and dialed Chini. It rang 6 times, but no one answered. On the 7th ring, the call was hung up. He called again, but the phone was off. Linsiki panicked. Is she not going to give it to us? Didn't you say the house would definitely be ours? Shan Jojo gritted his teeth and said, when did I ever say it would be yours? I said the house belongs to her now, but when my dad bought it back then, there was a mortgage on it. If she wants to sell it, she has to pay off the loan first. She doesn't have that kind of money. Linsiki rolled her eyes. Then we can help her pay off the loan, and then she'll give us the house. Right. Sinjo let out a cold laugh. You'll pay. Do you know how much is still owed? 8 million. What are you going to use to pay it back? Linsiki was choked speechless as an intern doctor. She only made a little over 3,000 yuan a month. What could that possibly cover? At that moment, a black Mercedes slowly pulled up in front of the villa entrance. The car window rolled down, and Shini sat in the driver's seat wearing sunglasses and a sharply tailored black trench coat. She looked at the 2 people standing at the doorway, the corners of her lips lifting slightly. Sinhao Liniki, what are you doing standing at my doorstep? She said. Liniki rushed up and slapped the car window, saying, Shinling, don't get too smug. This house originally belonged to Yanho. What right do you have to hog it? Shining took off her sunglasses and looked at her. Liki felt a little unnerved by those eyes, but she still braced herself and said, The divorce agreement says it was given to you, but you haven't transferred the title yet. This house is still marital property. I'm telling you, I've already consulted a lawyer. As long as Yanja doesn't agree, you can't take this house away. Shinling smiled. She pushed open the car door and stood in front of Leniki. She was half a head taller than Leniki, and just by standing there, she instantly dwarfed Linsiki's presence. Chini said, Linsiki, which lawyer did you consult? I suggest you change to another one because your lawyer didn't tell you one thing. The name on the property deed for this house isn't San Yenjo's. Linsiki froze. What? Shinlani took a small red booklet out of her bag, opened it, and held it up in front of Leniki on the property. Date. The owner column clearly read 3 words. Shinling. The date was 5 years ago, the second month after Shininji and Sei Yanha got married. Sean's face turned completely pale. He snatched the property deed and looked it over 3 times, his voice shaking. Impossible. This was the house my dad bought. How could it be under your name? Shini took back the property deed and put it back into her bag, saying, because 5 years ago, when your father's company's capital chain broke, you begged me to use the money my mother left me to help your family pay off the loan. In exchange, this house was transferred into my name. San Yanjo, you didn't forget, did you? That 8 million was paid by me. Sin Jaja's lips trembled. He hadn't forgotten. Of course, he hadn't forgotten. 5 years ago, he had knelt before Shinling and begged for her help. Shininji had said nothing and taken 8 million from her mother's inheritance to help the Song family pay off their debt back then. He swore he would treat her well for the rest of his life. And now what is he doing? Bringing his mistress to look at houses. Linny looked at Shan Jojo in disbelief. You lied to me. You kept telling me this house was yours, and it turns out it belongs to your ex-wife. Shan Jojo could not say a word. Shinlini looked at Leniki and said in a calm tone, Young lady, let me give you a piece of advice. This man can betray me, and he can betray you too. You think you're the winner. You're just the next me. After saying that, she walked into the villa, and the gate slammed shut heavily in front of the 2 of them. Leniki stood outside the door, trembling with anger all over. She turned to glare at Sinha, tears welling up in her eyes. Sun Yanjo, you bastard. You lied to me, saying the house was yours. You lied to me, saying you would marry me. You lied to me, saying you would give me the best life. And what happened? You don't even have a place to live. Shan Jojo irritably tugged at his tie. Stop making a scene. I'll figure something out. Figure something out. What can you figure out? You still haven't settled the hospital matter. Your ex-wife has spilled all your dirty laundry, and you still want to be department director. Dream on. Seen's face twisted for a moment, and he suddenly raised his hand and slapped Linsiki across the face. Shut up. Linsiki covered her face and looked at him in disbelief. The man who had spoken sweet words to her and said he would take responsibility for her had hit her. She ran away crying. Shan Jojo stood there looking at the tightly shut villa gate, looking at the gleaming brass plaque on the door on which were written the 2 characters. He suddenly felt that these past 5 years of his life had been a joke. Chapter 3. The counterattack in the hospital. Zhao Xiuan was a ruthless man. He had worked in the hospital for 12 years. His technical skills were no worse than Shan Ho's, but because he couldn't write papers or cultivate connections, he had always been held down by Xin Hao. Every year during the professional title evaluation, San Yanzhou would present those papers published in high-impact journals, while Xiao Xiuan could only stand nearby and stare helplessly. He knew those papers weren't written by Sinha. Everyone in the department knew, but no one dared say anything because Shan Jaja's father-in-law, no, ex-father-in-law, had been a senior leader in the health system. But now that Shinlini had divorced him, that umbrella of protection was gone. Xiao Xiuan felt that his chance had come. The medical report was given to him by Shini through an intermediary. It detailed 2 medical accidents that had occurred over the past 2 years under Sayanha. One was accidentally injuring a patient's common bile duct during a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, which led to a second surgery. The other was failing to address postoperative bleeding in time, and the patient nearly lost his life after being transferred to another hospital. Both incidents had been suppressed by Sanyanga. The first patient took 200,000 yuan in hush money, and the second patient was transferred to another hospital where the medical records were altered beyond recognition, but Shalini kept the original records. She was Sanyanjo's wife and also a doctor at the same hospital, so she could see the original versions of all medical records. After Xiao Shiyuan got this document, he did not submit it right away. He was waiting for the right moment. He waited until Shini finished the resignation procedures and until Sean thought everything had settled before handing the document to the discipline inspection team. On Monday morning, the hospital held a general meeting for all staff. S. Yanzhou sat in the surgical department seats, feeling extremely uneasy. He had not slept all night. Linsiki had run off. Shaininji was not answering his calls, and his father's company had run into trouble, too. Apparently, a major creditor had suddenly demanded early repayment, amounting to more than 20 million yuan. He did not know that the big creditor was Shini. At the meeting, the dean first gave a summary of the hospital's work in the first half of the year, then talked about its future development plan. Shan Zhou listened absent-mindedly, his fingers twirling a pen the whole time. Suddenly, the dean changed the subject. Recently, we have received some reports concerning the professional conduct of certain doctors. The hospital takes this very seriously and has already set up a special investigation team until the investigation results are released. The doctors involved will be suspended from all surgeries and outpatient clinics. The entire auditorium fell silent. Everyone knew who the dean was talking about. Shan Jiajia's face looked as if someone had splashed white paint on it. Xiao Xiuan stood up, his voice neither too loud nor too soft. Dean, I have a suggestion. Since we're going to investigate, it should be open and transparent. I suggest making photocopies of the relevant medical records for the directors of each department to review together, so no one can say the hospital is covering for anyone. Sean whipped around and glared at Xiao Xiuan. Xiao Xiuan met his gaze and gave a faint smile. The dean pondered for a moment and said, "Yes, the medical affairs department will photocopy the relevant materials and distribute them to each department." Sin's hands began to tremble. He knew what those medical records meant. Once they were made public, his reputation would be ruined. In this industry, reputation is everything. Without a reputation, no patient would dare let you operate on them, and no hospital would dare hire you. After the meeting ended, San Yanzhou rushed into Xiao Ziyuan's office. He grabbed Xiao Xiuan by the collar of his white coat, his eyes bloodshot. "You did this. You turned those things in. Xiao Xiuan, are you trying to get me killed?" Xiao Xiuan didn't struggle. Instead, he smiled. He said, "Sun Yanha, get one thing straight. It's not me who's going to get you killed. It's you. Those incidents were done by your own hands, and the medical records were altered by your own hands. I just handed over the truth." Sinho raised his fist, but he didn't bring it down because he saw the person standing at the door. Xinling. She didn't know when she had come to the hospital, leaning against the door frame, arms crossed. She watched him. Shan Jojo let go of Zio Xiuan and staggered toward Shaininji. His voice was choking with sobs. "Linny, why did you do this? We were married after all. Why did you have to ruin me?" Shining looked at him, her eyes as calm as a dad. "Still pull," she said. "Sun Yanhao, I ruined you when you cheated. Did you ever think about us being husband and wife when you got her pregnant? Did you ever think about us being husband and wife when you threw the keys to the mansion in front of me like you were dismissing a beggar? Did you ever think about us being husband and wife?" Shan Jojo could not say a word. Shinli continued, "Besides, I'm only handing over the truth. The truth is there already. I didn't fabricate it. You think it's unfair. You feel wronged. Have you ever thought about the 2 patients who were accidentally injured? They don't even have anywhere to complain because you altered their medical records. Sin Jaja's tears finally fell. He knelt in the hallway, clutching the hem of Sheenie's pants. His voice, Linny, I'm begging you. Go tell the dean that those medical records were forged by you. Say you did this to get back at me and take the blame. Okay, I'm begging you. Shining looked down at him. This man, kneeling on the floor, had shared her bed for 5 years. She had once thought he was her whole world. She helped him write papers, process data, and deal with reviews, giving him the best years of her life. Now he was kneeling on the ground, begging her to take the blame. She bent down, pried away the hand gripping her pant leg, and said softly, Sun Yanjo, do you know why I was able to put up with you for 5 years? Because my mother told me one thing before she died. Find someone you love and then accept everything about him. I've always remembered those words. So I tolerated all your selfishness, greed, and hypocrisy. She paused, then straightened up. But now, what my mother said no longer applies. Because you're not worthy. She turned and left. The doctors and nurses in the corridor watched the scene, and not a single person said a word. Someone secretly took a photo of Sanyanga kneeling on the ground and posted it in the hospital's WeChat group. 3 minutes later, the photo had spread throughout the entire hospital. 10 minutes later, the photo was sent to a group of colleagues in the same field. That afternoon, Sanyanjo received a notice from the hospital. All clinical work was suspended, pending investigation. He sat in the empty office, his phone ringing nonstop. All kinds of messages came in from colleagues, classmates, and peers. Some asked, I heard something happened to you. Some said, I've seen that medical record of yours, too, and there really is a problem. And some simply blocked him. Linsiki also saw that photo. She was tidying up her things in her rented room, getting ready to move out. When she saw the photo, her hand paused for a moment. Then she tossed her phone aside. She didn't care whether Sanyanjo lived or died. She only cared about one thing, the medical licensing exam. Her last exam result came out and it showed under review. She called the testing center to ask, and they said there was something unusual with her paper, so further investigation was needed. She didn't understand what unusual meant. She had clearly taken the exam herself, though she had copied a few questions from the person next to her, but that shouldn't be a big deal. Right. What she didn't know was that her seat number in the exam room had been specially arranged by the mentor who was a classmate of Shininji. The examinee beside her was someone from the testing center who deliberately wrote the answers wrong, so she would copy them and end up with a perfect score. Copying the wrong answers and still getting a perfect score. Such an anomaly was enough to determine cheating. Linsiki's physician qualification certificate is something she'll never be able to get in her lifetime. Chapter 4. Linsiki's Panic. Linsiki panicked. She called the exam center more than 20 times, but the response was always the same. Your scores are currently under review. Please wait patiently. She couldn't wait. She had applied for residency training positions at 3 hospitals, and each one required her medical licensing exam results. Without those results, she didn't even qualify for an interview. She called Shinjo, hoping he could pull some strings for her, but Sanyenjo's line was always busy. He was busy finding a lawyer and preparing to deal with the hospital's investigation. Liniki was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She rummaged through her rental apartment and found a phone number Sanyenjo had given her before. It was for a division director in the health system. She dialed the number, and it rang for a long time before someone answered. Hello, who are you looking for? Leaky said with an apologetic smile. Hello, I'm a friend of Dr. Sinho. I'd like to ask about the licensed physician exam. The other person interrupted her. Shanjiao, what are you to him? Leaky said, I am his girlfriend. The other party was silent for a few seconds, then said, Sun Yenjo is currently under investigation. You'd better cut ties with him. I can help you with the exam issue, so you should just wait for the results. The call ended. Linny held her phone, shaking with anger. She hated Shanjo, hated how useless he was, hated that he couldn't even handle something this small. She hated Sheeny even more. Hated why she was such a lingering presence. Hated why she even had to meddle in something like an exam. But what she didn't know was that the exam really did have something to do with Sheeny. That afternoon, Linsiki received a call from an unfamiliar number. Is this Liniki? I'm Director Lee from Tanhua Hospital. I heard you're looking for a residency training position. Linsiki's heart suddenly raced. Tianhua Hospital was the best private hospital in the city. If she could get in, her future would be set. Yes, yes. Director Lee. Hello. I'd really love to work at your hospital. Director Lee said. I've looked at your resume. Everything else is pretty good. But as for the licensed physician certificate, you haven't obtained it yet. Right. Lin Siki hurriedly said. I'm taking the exam and the results will be out soon. I guarantee I'll pass. Director Lee let out a laugh and said, Lindsay, I won't beat around the bush with you either. I have a friend who is your mentor, Professor Zhang. He asked me to pass on a message to you. Linsiki's heart sank. What message? Director Lee said. He said that when you were interning under him, you were often late and left early. Your medical records were written improperly, and you even played on your phone in the operating room. He originally planned to turn a blind eye and let you graduate, but someone asked him to reconsider. Linsiki's lips trembled. Who asked him to reconsider directly said, You don't need to worry about that. Just remember one thing. There's no way you're going to pass your licensed physician exam. Stop wasting your time and switch to another field. The call ended. Linsiki collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down her face. Professor Zhang, her mentor, that smiling old man who praised her for being smart and capable every time he saw her. She had thought he really liked her, thought he would help her write recommendation letters, thought he would give her special treatment. As a result, one sentence from him could ruin her future. And Lin Siki didn't even need to guess who was the person who made Professor Zhang change his mind. She grabbed her phone and frantically searched for Sheeny's number. She had previously secretly memorized Shining's number from San Yanzhou's phone, but had never dared to call it. Now she couldn't care less. The call connected. Shinling, what the hell do you want? Linny screamed into the phone. I stole your man. If you want revenge, go after him. Why are you coming after me? I've never done anything to you. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then Shininji's voice came through, calm and unhurried. Linsiki, you're wrong. It's not messing with you. It's you messing with yourself. __, it was clearly you who got Professor Zhang to screw me. Over. You think I don't know. What's your relationship with Professor Zhang? Sheeny laughed and said, Professor Zhang was my classmate in college. We studied together for 4 years. He owes me his life. I helped him write his graduation thesis, so he owes me a favor. Linsiki froze classmates in college. Professor Jean is in his 50s this year, and Shinlini is only 32. How could they possibly have been classmates? What she didn't know was that Sheeny had started college at 17 and earned her master's degree at 21, graduating 3 years earlier than her peers. Professor Zhang was her classmate in the same cohort. The two of them wrote their graduation thesis together, studied for the medical licensing exam together, and did their internships together. This favor has been owed by Professor Zhang for more than 10 years. Shinling continued, Linny, did you think you could get away with cheating on the exam? The answer sheet of the candidate sitting next to you was the standard answer key for your exam room. You copied 8 questions, and all 8 were wrong because that candidate deliberately changed the correct answers to the wrong options. You copied a perfect score, but the perfect score paper doesn't match the standard answers at all. What do you call that? Irrefutable evidence. Linsiki's mind went blank. She remembered the day of the exam. Sitting beside her was a chubby girl who kept coughing. She copied that girl's answers because she thought the girl looked really capable. As it turned out, that girl was from the exam center. Linny burst into tears. Her voice, Shinling, I'm begging you. Please let me go. What happened between me and San Yanzhou was my fault. I shouldn't have seduced him. I'll quit. I'll stay far away from him. Can you just let me go? Sheeny was silent on the other end of the phone for a few seconds. Then she said, Linsiki, you want to quit? Do you really think you still have the right to say that? Now you've already ruined Senyanjo, and you've ruined yourself. Too, I'm not the one forcing you. It was the path you chose yourself. Liniki cried, What exactly do you want? Money. A house. I'll give you everything. I have nothing. I'll give Shan Jojo back to you. Okay. Shinling said Yanho. I don't want him anymore. I'm giving him to you. But you should ask him whether he still wants you. The call was hung up. Lin Siki held the phone and sat dazed for 10 minutes. Then she suddenly remembered something. Her belly. She touched her lower abdomen where it was slightly swollen. The child was already 3 months along. Her pregnancy was her greatest bargaining chip. Shan Jojo very much wanted this child. He was an only son, and the Song family had passed down a single heir for 3 generations. His parents had been urging him to give them a grandson. Before this, Shinlingi had failed to get pregnant for 5 years, and Song Yenjo's mother had often called her a hen that can't lay eggs. Now, Linsiki was pregnant, as long as the baby in her belly was a boy. The Song family would never reject her. Hope flared up in her again. She picked up her phone and sent Song Yanjo a message. Iengu, I thought it through. I'm not going to keep making trouble with you anymore. The baby in my belly is yours, and there's no way I could not want him. Let's live our lives together. Okay, no matter whether we have a house or money. I'll stay with you after the message was sent. There was still no reply. Lindsay waited for half an hour and sent another one. Yanho, are you there? Still no reply. She called, but the phone was turned off. Liki's heart sank to the bottom. What she didn't know was that Sei Yanjo was currently discussing something with his lawyer. How to prove that the child in Liniki's belly was not his because that child really wasn't his. Chapter 5. Shan Jojo knelt down and begged for reconciliation. Sinha had never been this humiliated in his life. The hospital's investigative team moved into the surgical department and took away all his medical records from the past 3 years. In front of the entire department, Xiaoan projected those 2 altered charts of his onto the big screen and analyzed them page by page. Everyone look here. The timing in the progress notes doesn't match the timing of the doctor's orders. The patient developed post-operative bleeding at 5:10, but the progress notes say it was 6:00. What was Dr. Song doing during this 1-hour gap? The meeting room was utterly silent. Sin had kept his head down, his fingernails digging into his palm. And Xiaoan continued. And look at this. The patient's signature on this document is clearly different from the handwriting on other documents they signed. I suspect this informed consent form was signed afterward. Sinhao could finally take no more. He shot to his feet and said sharply, Jiao Xuan, enough. What right do you, a general surgeon, have to review my medical records? Xuan said unhurriedly, I'm not qualified, but the investigation team is. I'm just helping them organize the materials. Dr. Song, please don't get agitated. The head of the investigation team tapped the table. Sei Yanjo, please sit down. If you feel Dr. Xiao isn't suitable to be present, he can step aside. Shan Jojo sat down, gritting his teeth. He knew Xiaoan wouldn't step aside. The whole hospital was waiting to laugh at him. Xiaoan was just the most eager one. The investigation lasted 3 days. In those 3 days, Shan Jojo lost 10 pounds and half his hair turned white. His lawyer told him that if the investigation concluded he bore the primary responsibility, not only would he be fired from the hospital, but his medical license could also be revoked. And also, the lawyer hesitated. Those 2 patients may sue you. The compensation won't be low. Sinjaja's head was buzzing. His father's company was in serious trouble. 2. That mysterious major creditor suddenly demanded early repayment. The loan of more than 20 million had to be paid off within 3 months. His father was so anxious that he ended up in the hospital, and his mother called him in tears, asking him to come up with a solution. What could he possibly do? He had already used up all his savings to hire a lawyer, and he could barely even afford the rent. Leaky was still sending him messages, one after another. Where are you? Why aren't you replying? Are you not going to want me anymore? Just looking at them annoyed him, so he blocked her number directly. On Monday morning, Sinjo did something no one had expected. He ran to the entrance of Shinlani Isahuin and knelt down. It wasn't a half kneel, and it wasn't kneeling on one knee. It was kneeling on both knees with his forehead pressed to the ground. The courtyard house was deep in the alley, and there were plenty of people coming and going. There were aunties buying vegetables, old men walking dogs, and delivery guys dropping off takeout. Everyone who passed stopped to take a look, then pulled out their phones to take pictures. Yenjo didn't care anymore. His reputation was already ruined. Ruining it a little more didn't matter. He knelt for an hour before Shini's door finally opened. Shini stood at the door wearing loungewear and holding a cup of coffee. She looked down at Sanyanjo, who was kneeling on the floor with no surprise, no sympathy, and even no disgust. She simply asked calmly, "How long have you been kneeling here?" Sinjojo lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed. "Linny, I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. Come back. Okay, let's remarry." Shiny took a sip of her coffee and said nothing. Sean Jojo kneeled and crawled forward a few steps, trying to grab Shini's foot. But Shini took a step back. "Linny, I know I've wronged you. What happened with Lin Siki was just me being bewitched by lust. I swear I'll never do it again. Forgive me this once." "Okay," Shini said. "Sun Yanjo, are you kneeling here because you love me?" Sean Jojo froze for a moment, then nodded frantically. "Of course I love you. I've always loved you. What happened with Liniki was just a moment of confusion." Shinlini interrupted him. "Stop talking. You don't love me. What you love is my thesis, my technology, my connections, and my money. What you lost wasn't me. It was everything you depended on to survive." Tears fell from Sean Jaja's eyes. "It's not like that." Shini crouched down so she was eye level with him. She said, "Sunjo, I'm going to tell you 3 things. First, I am the creditor of your father's company. That 20 million loan was lent to your family by me in the name of the company inherited from my mother. Now, I want you to pay it back in full within 3 months." Sean Jaja's face turned deathly pale. Shinling continued, "Second, I gave the original of that medical practice document to Xiao Xuan, but there's still a copy with my lawyer. If you don't want that copy to show up in court, you'd better cooperate with the investigation." Sanyenjo's lips were trembling. Shini stood up and said, "Third, and most important of all, the child in Liniki's belly isn't yours." Sinjo suddenly looked up. "What did you say?" Shini smiled, and her smile was very beautiful, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Don't you know, before you, Linny had also been involved with Dr. Wong from your department. Dr. Wong is married and his wife is vice directly from the hospital administration office. After Linny got pregnant, Dr. Wong refused to take responsibility, so she came looking for you." Seeing Joe's mind went completely blank. Dr. Wong Jianghua, 10 years older than him and in the same surgical team. That bald, beer bead Wang Jianghua, who stuttered when he spoke. "You're talking nonsense," Sanyanjo shouted. "Siki isn't that kind of person." Shini took a test report out of her pocket and threw it in front of Sean. "This is Lin Siki's prenatal check record from 3 months ago. Take a look at the gestational age. 7 weeks. 3 months ago. You and Leaky weren't even together yet. You only got together with her 2 months ago, so this child can't possibly be yours." Sean Jojo picked up the form, his hands shaking violently. 7 weeks. 3 months ago. Back then, he and Lin Siki were just ordinary coworkers, barely having spoken a few words. He remembered the day Lin Siki came to confess her feelings, saying she had always liked him, that she admired his medical skills and character. She had seemed so sincere. so innocent, like a girl untouched by the world. And what was the result? She had gotten pregnant by someone else, and, unable to find a man to take responsibility, had set her sights on him. Sean Jojo felt his stomach churn violently and bent over by the roadside. Retching dryly, Sheeny stood at the doorway looking at him. Passers-by stopped to take photos and record videos. Some were laughing, some shaking their heads, and some murmured, "Serves him right." Sheeny turned and went back into the courtyard, closing the door. She leaned against the door panel and let out a breath. From outside the door came, growing louder and louder. She thought, this man, oh no, this trash had finally learned what karma felt like. Chapter 6. The Humiliation of a Family Dinner. Sinjo's mother, Jean Lange, was no ordinary woman. She had worked as a head nurse in a public hospital for more than 20 years, and in that time, she had seen all the warmth and coldness of human relationships, developing a sharp snowbash eye. Back when Sheeny married into the Song family, Jean Lange treated her daughter-in-law wonderfully because Shining's father was a leader in the health system. Later, when Shinling's father retired, Jean Lange's attitude changed. It went from Lingy, eat more, to Lingy, why are you working overtime again? And then to you've been married for 5 years and still haven't gotten pregnant. Is there something wrong with you? Shining had always put up with it because every time Sean would speak up for her, what she didn't know was that every time Sean Jojo was in front of his mother, he put on a completely different face. Mom, I want a divorce, too. But although her father is retired, he still has some connections we can use. Now that Shinli had divorced Sun Yenha, Jean Lange was so happy she almost wanted to set off firecrackers. She called all the relatives and told everyone to come to their house for a meal over the weekend. She deliberately picked an upscale restaurant, booked a private banquet room, and said she wanted to celebrate her son getting out of the sea of suffering. What she didn't know was that her son was now swimming in that sea of suffering. On Saturday evening, the Song family's relatives gathered in the dining room. Jean Lange wore a bright red cheap pow, had her hair permed and put on heavy makeup. She sat in the seat of honor, smiling so broadly that she couldn't close her mouth. S. Yanjo sat beside her, his face sallow and his eye sockets deeply sunken as if he had aged 10 years. He lowered his head and played with his phone, not daring to meet anyone's eyes. Second Aunt leaned in and asked, Yanjo, I heard you found a young and beautiful girlfriend. When are you going to bring her back for us to see? The corner of San Yanjo's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Jean Lange hurriedly said, Soon, soon. I've seen that girl Siki before, fresh and lovely, and she's even a college student. The key is she's pregnant. Our Song family has an heir. The relatives all rushed to congratulate them, and laughter filled the private room. Sean Jaja's father, Song-gu, sat on the other side with a furrowed brow the whole time. He was an honest man who ran a medical equipment company, and business had been hard these past few years, relying entirely on the support of Shiny's family connections. He said in a low voice to Sinha, regarding your divorce from Shinlingi, was it handled cleanly? What about her father's side? Sinho said irritably, Don't mention her. Song-woo sighed and said nothing more. The dishes were served. Abalone sea cucumber and lobster filled the table. Jean Lange raised her wine glass and said loudly, Come on, everyone, let's raise a toast together to celebrate my son's rebirth. Before the words had even faded, the private room door was pushed open. Shinli stood at the doorway wearing a dark green velvet gown, her hair pinned up and a string of pearl necklace around her neck. She wore light makeup, looking poised and elegant. Behind her followed a middle-aged man dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase in his hand. Jean Lange's smile froze on her face. Shining walked in and said with a smile, Mom, oh no, Aunt Jang, I heard you were having a meal here. I just happened to be eating in the private room next door, so I came over to toast you. Jean Lange's face turned red and then pale. Who let you come here? You're not welcome here. Shining ignored her and turned to look at Song Wafu. She picked up the wine bottle on the table, poured herself a glass of red wine, and carried the glass over to Songwoo. Uncle Song, let me toast you. Thank you for taking care of me these past 5 years. Song Bufu stood up awkwardly and clinked glasses with her. Sheenie tilted her head back and drank it all in, then sat down the glass and looked around at the relatives seated at the table. Elders, everyone, I've come here today for one more thing besides toasting, and that is to make an announcement. She took a document from the middle-aged man standing behind her and held it up. This is Attorney Wong, my representative. This document is the equity transfer agreement for Mr. Sanga's medical device company, Go Medical. Liney Investment, which is wholly owned by me, has already acquired 51% of Go Medical's equity. The private room fell silent. Song Ge's face turned pale in an instant. What did you say? Liney Investment is you. Shining said, Yes, Uncle Song. Lenny Investment is the company my mother left to me 3 years ago. When your company's capital chain broke, you borrowed 25 million yuan from Line Investment. You signed an equity pledge agreement. If you couldn't repay the loan by the due date, Line Investment would have the right to acquire your equity. She flipped through a few pages of documents and continued this August. The loan came due. You failed to repay it on time. So, according to the agreement, Lenny Investment completed the equity acquisition. Now, I am the actual controller of Go Medical. The chopsticks in Song Wu's hand fell to the floor. Jean Lange screamed, Nonsense. You you cheated our family company out of us. Shinli glanced at her, her tone calm. Aunt Song, your husband personally signed the contract. The legal documents are complete. If you think there's a problem, you can sue in court. Jiang Lanji was so angry that she was trembling all over. She grabbed the wine glass on the table and was about to throw it at Shai Ninji. Sei Yanzhou quickly stopped her and said in a low voice, Mom, don't make a scene. Shinli looked at Shan Jojo and smiled. Sun Yanha, there's one more thing I want you to know. She said, the child in Leniki's belly isn't yours. The private room erupted in chaos. What? It's not Yanja's. Really? Wasn't Leniki pregnant with Yanja's child? Chinli raised her voice. 3 months ago, Leniki had a fling with Dayar Wang Jiang from your hospital. Wang Jiang denied it, so she went to San Yanzhou. You can investigate this yourselves. Song. Yanja sprang to his feet, veins bulging on his face. Sheenie, enough. You came here on purpose to ruin the event, didn't you? Sheenie looked at him and said word by word, I'm here to collect a debt. Sean, what you owe me is not just the 8 million yuan mortgage, but also the 327 papers I wrote for you over the past 5 years and the 28 years of my life you ruined. The private room was so quiet that even the hum of the air conditioner could be heard. Shinli turned and walked out. When she reached the door, she stopped again. By the way, Aunt Jiang, she said, glancing back at Jiang Lanji, you just said you wanted to congratulate your son on being reborn, didn't you? I don't think that's quite right. What he lost wasn't an incompetent wife, but a backer who could have kept him living like a respectable human being. The door closed. The private room fell into a deathly silence. Jiang Lanji slumped in her chair. The color drained from her face. Sanwu covered his face with both hands, his shoulders trembling. Shan Jojo stood beside the table like a puppet. Second aunt said softly, Sister-in-law, how about we eat first? The dishes are getting cold. No one picked up their chopsticks. Shan Jojo suddenly rushed out of the private room and ran to the entrance of the restaurant. Sheenie was about to get into the car when he grabbed her by the arm. Linny, he shouted, you can't do this to my dad. This is his only company. That's the result of his life's work. Xinling shook off his hand. His life's work. What about mine? Shanzhou, when you were cheating, did you ever think about my life's work when you forced me to leave with nothing? Did you ever think that the money my mom left me had been tied up in your father's company for 3 years? Sanyanjo could not say a word. Shini opened the car door and got in. She rolled down the window, looked at Sanyanjo standing in the rain, and said one sentence. Sanyanjo, you think this is over? No, it's not over yet. There's even more to come about you and Leniki. Just wait and see the show. The car drove away. Sean Joe stood at the entrance of the restaurant. The rain grew heavier and heavier, soaking his suit through and through. His phone buzzed. It was a push notification. An associate chief surgeon at a top-tier hospital is suspected of tampering with medical records. The investigation results will be announced next week. Sei Yanjo closed his eyes, feeling the world spin around him. Chapter 7. Linsiki's scheme exposed. Linsiki was 4 months pregnant. Her belly was already noticeably bulging. Impossible to hide, even in loose clothes. She lived alone in a rented apartment and survived on takeout every day. Sean Jojo didn't answer her calls or reply to her messages. She went to Sei Yanjo's hospital to find him, but the security guard stopped her and said she wasn't family of an employee, so she couldn't go in. She then went to Seiyo's rental apartment, only to find that the lock had been changed. A neighbor told her that the man had moved out 3 days earlier, and no one knew where he had gone. That was when Leniki realized that she had been abandoned. Not abandoned by Sanyanjo. She had long known that man couldn't be relied on, but abandoned by everyone. The hospital no longer wanted her. The exam center said she was suspected of cheating. Her advisor refused to write her a recommendation letter. And even her parents wouldn't answer her calls because her mother found out she was pregnant before marriage and got so angry she was hospitalized. She sat alone on the floor of her rented apartment, staring at her phone screen. Her best friend sent her a message. Siki, I heard about what happened to you. Don't blame me for not helping you. But my boyfriend said you offended someone important. You should hurry back to your hometown and stop staying here. Lin Siki replied with one word. Oh. She threw her phone aside and touched her stomach. The baby was already 4 months old. If she didn't terminate it soon, she would have to give birth. But she didn't have the money for an induction abortion, and no hospital was willing to take her in because she was notorious in the medical circle and no one wanted to cause trouble. Suddenly, she came up with an idea, a vicious idea. She was going to have a miscarriage, but not by miscarrying herself. She was going to pin it on someone else. She wanted everyone to believe that Shinli had caused her miscarriage. That way, Shini would be utterly disgraced. Even if they couldn't send her to prison, they could still saddle her with the stigma of taking a life. Linsiki began to plan. She first checked the places Shalini often went. The hospital, the sawin, the gym, and a cafe called Wong. She decided to make her move at the cafe that afternoon. Linsiki arrived early at Wutan Cafe and sat in a corner. She ordered a glass of warm water and tucked a small bottle of Mrist, a kind of abortion pill, into her pocket. She sent Shini a message. I'm at Wong. I want to talk to you about Song Yenha. There are some things I have to say to you. If you don't come, I'll go to the media. Shini replied, be there in 20 minutes. Linsiki's heartbeat sped up. She had a plan. Once Shalini arrived, she would deliberately pick a fight with her, then pretend that Shalini had pushed her down and secretly take the abortion pill. By the time the ambulance arrived, she would say that Shalini had pushed her, causing the miscarriage. There was surveillance in the cafe, but she knew where the blind spot was. That corner happened to be the camera's dead angle. She had calculated everything. 20 minutes later, Shalini pushed open the door and came in. She was wearing a white shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail, looking neat and sharp when she saw Linsiki. She didn't hesitate and walked straight over to sit down. Go ahead. What do you want to talk about? Shinling's tone was flat. Linsiki forced a smile. Doctor, Shin, I don't want to go against you anymore. I know I was wrong. I want to leave. Sean, I want to start over. Can you forgive me? Shining looked at her, her eyes narrowing slightly. Linsiki, what is the bottle in your pocket for? Linsiki's heart sank sharply. She instinctively covered her pocket. Shinli went on my Pristone, an abortion pill. You planned to take it in front of me and frame me for it, didn't you? Linny's face turned deathly pale. How do you know? Sheeny leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Linsiki, before you came, did you forget to turn off the surveillance at home? I already installed cameras in your rental place. Linsiki's mind went blank. Surveillance, when had they been installed? Shinlini took out her phone, opened a video, and pushed it in front of her. In the video, Linsiki was sitting on the bed in her rental room, holding that bottle of mipristone in her hand, muttering, "After I take this medicine, I'll say Sheeny pushed me. By then, she'll be drowning in lawsuits. I'd like to see how smug she can still be." Linsiki's hands began to tremble. She reached out to grab the phone, but Sheeny quickly pulled it back. "Linsiki, you have no way out now," Shinlini said. "I've already handed this video over to my lawyer. If you try to frame me, this video will be evidence. By then, not only will you go to jail, you'll also be charged with attempted murder because inducing labor to terminate a 4-month-old fetus is legally considered intentional homicide." Linsiki's tears streamed down her face with a thud. She dropped to her knees and grabbed Sheeny's hand. "Doctor, Shin, please, I'm begging you, don't call the police. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you like this. Please let me go. My child can't grow up without a mother." Shinling looked down at her, not a trace of pity in her eyes. "Linny, just now you were trying to ruin me, completely. And now you're begging me to let you go. Do you think I'll forgive you?" Leaky cried in heartbreaking anguish. "I'm not human. I'm an animal. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But my child is innocent. You can't make an unborn child pay for my sins." Shinlini pulled her hand back and stood up. "Don't worry. I won't call the police. Not because I forgive you, but because you're not worth my time." She took a piece of paper out of her bag and threw it onto the table. "This is Wang Jiang Wa's paternity test report. The child in your belly is his. I've already sent this report to Wang Jiang Wa's wife, the deputy director, Li, from the hospital administration office. You should know better than I do what kind of person Deputy Director Li is." Liniki's face went completely white. Deputy Director Li was the most impossible woman to deal with in the entire hospital. She had long heard rumors that her husband Wang Jiang was fooling around outside, but she had never managed to catch solid evidence now that the paternity test report had been delivered to her hands. Wang Jiang was finished, and Linny was even more finished. Shiny turned and walked out. When she reached the door, she paused and said without turning her head, "Linsiki, you'd better go back to your hometown in this city. You no longer have a place to stand." The cafe door closed. Lindsay collapsed onto the floor, drawing strange looks from several customers around her. What she didn't know was that Shininji hadn't told the whole truth. That surveillance video was indeed from Linsiki's rental apartment, but the camera wasn't installed by Shininji. It was installed by the landlord because a previous tenant had used the place for fraud. Shinlini just happened to know the landlord and happened to see that footage sometimes. Coincidences in this world are more terrifying than conspiracies. Chapter 8. Scene Joe kneels and begs for mercy. The hospital's investigation results are out. San Yenjo was found to bear primary responsibility for 2 medical incidents. The disciplinary decision was dismissal from public service, revocation of his practicing physician license, and compensation of a total of 2 million yuan to the 2 patients. The day the news was announced, San Yanzhou stood at the hospital entrance, looking at the place where he had worked for 10 years. The security guard stopped him. "Dr. Song, you can't go in anymore. Your ID badge has already been deactivated." San Yanzhou looked at the security guard, his lips moving as if he wanted to say, "I'm the deputy director here," but he didn't say it out loud because he was no longer one. Xiao Xiuan walked out of the hospital wearing a brand new white coat with a name badge reading Director of General Surgery pinned to his chest. He glanced at Song Yanha, nodded, said nothing, and headed straight for the parking lot. Sinho stood there watching Xiao Xiuan's back. The man he had kept beneath him for 12 years was now his superior. "No, He was no longer even a subordinate. He was nothing now. Se Yanjo's phone rang. It was a call from his mother. Yanjo, come back quickly. Your father has had a heart attack. Jean Langi cried over the phone. Sean Jojo rushed to the hospital. Not the one he worked at, but another hospital. Sua lay on a bed in the emergency room, an oxygen mask on his face, with the ECG monitor beeping. Jean Langi sat beside him crying, miserably. Your dad's company is gone. The house is gone and he has nothing left now. That ex-wife of yours, she's just a devil. Sean Jojo stood by the bed, looking at his unconscious father. He suddenly remembered what Shininji had said. What you lost was not just me. She was right. He had lost his job, his house, his reputation, and his father's company. He had lost everything, and all of it had been caused by him himself. If he had not cheated, if he had lived properly with Shinlingi, if he had not been so greedy. But now it was too late to say anything. On Monday morning, Sei Yenjo went to Shini's courtyard house again. This time he did not kneel. He stood at the door, rang the doorbell, and waited for 10 minutes. Shini opened the door. You're here again, she said. Her tone weary son, Yanjo said. Linny, I'm not asking to get back together anymore. I only ask one thing of you. Please let my dad's company go. That's the result of my dad's lifetime of hard work, and his heart isn't in good shape. He can't take it. Shinli looked at him and fell silent for a few seconds. Sanho, do you know why your father's company has been able to survive until now? Because 3 years ago, it was I, not someone else, me, who took 25 million from my mother's inheritance and lent it to your family. Sean Jojo lowered his head. Shiny continued. Your father used that money to buy new equipment and expand the production line. He promised to pay it all back within 3 years and even signed an equity pledge agreement. But 3 years have passed and he hasn't even repaid enough interest. Tell me, should I let him off? Sin could not say a word. Shinling leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I'll do the math for you. Your dad owes me 25 million yuan in principal plus interest for a total of 32 million. That villa back then, I spent 8 million helping your family pay off the mortgage. Now it's worth 38 million. If I sell the villa, it would just be enough to pay off the debt. But your dad still owes me 32 million. Sin's voice was trembling. You mean you want my dad to pay back 32 million? What does he have to pay it with? Shining said that's his problem, not mine. Sean Jojo suddenly knelt down, not half kneeling, not on one knee, but both knees on the ground, his forehead hitting the stone slab. Linny, I'm begging you. I'm bowing to you. Please let my dad go. Give the company back to him, and I'll be your slave for the rest of my life. Okay, Shinling looked down at him. This once all-powerful deputy director of surgery, this man who once told her, I'm going to take responsibility for her, is now kneeling on the ground. His forehead scraped raw from bowing. Sean Jojo, do you remember what happened on the day we got divorced? Chini said. Yanjo froze for a moment. You threw the keys to the villa onto the coffee table and said, that's enough to last you the rest of your life. Shinli mimicked his tone, her voice laced with sarcasm. Do you know what I was thinking at the time? Sun Yanjo shook his head. I was thinking, this man is so pitiful. He treats a mortgage house with 8 million in loans as a treasure, thinking he can buy out a woman's entire life. He doesn't know that in that woman's pocket is every one of his dirty secrets. Shinling crouched down to meet Sei Yanjo's gaze at eye level. Sei Yanjo, do you know why I've been able to put up with you for 5 years? Because I've been waiting for a chance. Waiting for you to make a mistake. Waiting for the chance to bring you down in one fell swoop. Sin's pupils contracted. You've been scheming against me all along. Shini stood up and smiled. It's not scheming against you. It's protecting myself. I knew about you and Linny long ago. I knew long ago that you altered the medical records. I knew long ago about the financial situation of your father's company. I've been waiting for you to show your flaws. Sean Jojo slumped on the ground like a balloon drained of all its air. Shini turned and walked into the courtyard, closing the gate behind her. Through the crack in the door came her final words. Saying, the divorce agreement says you leave with nothing. That luxury mansion is mine. The 8 million you owe the bank still has to be repaid. As for your father's company, I'll hire a professional manager to run it. Your father can serve as a consultant at the company, but the shares will never be returned to him. San Yenjo knelled at the doorway beneath a ghostly white sun. His phone rang again. It was Liniki's number. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Soyana. Linny's voice was sharp and frantic. Wang Jiang Wa's wife came to see me. She's going to sue me for destroying her family. She also said she'd find someone to break my legs. Sun Yanzhou, save me. Shan Jojo closed his eyes. Liniki, he said, his voice, the child in your belly is not mine. There was a 3-second silence on the other end of the line. Then Liniki screamed, You know. How do you know? San Yanzhou, listen to me. Let me explain. That child is really yours. Wang Jiang was lying to you. Shan Jojo hung up the phone. He smashed his phone onto the ground, and the screen shattered into a spider web of cracks. He knelt in front of Xinling's door and stayed there for a full day. By evening, it started to rain. Sun Yanzhou was drenched like a drowned rat. Some passers-by recognized him and took out their phones to take pictures. Isn't that the doctor who cheated? I heard he got fired. Serves him right. TSK, TSK, TSK. So pitiful. S. Yenjo listened to these words and could not refute a single one because he knew they were right. Chapter 9. The Identity of the Final Twist. Lin Siki's father was named Lin Jamin. This person Shinlini had never met, but she had heard of him because when her mother was alive, she often mentioned this name. Lin Jamin was the business partner of Shinlin's father, Xin Yang, and the two of them had once worked together in the medical device business. Later, for some unknown reason, they had a falling out. Lin Jam went away to another city and never came back. Before Shinlin's mother, Ziyangking, passed away, she held Shinlin's hand and said, Linny, remember this. If someone with the surname Lin comes looking for you, don't trust him. He is not a good person. Shining had always kept these words in her heart, but she hadn't expected that someone surnamed Lin would enter her life in this way. It was Friday afternoon. Shining was tidying up her mother's belongings in the courtyard house. She found an old box which contained photos and letters from her mother's youth. A letter fell out. On the envelope were the words to Xiao, Wanqing personally, and the signature, Red Linen Jam. Xinling hesitated for a moment, then opened the letter. The letter was very short. Winging, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong, but it has already happened. Siki is an innocent child. She knows nothing. Please, for the sake of having helped you before, don't tell her. I will raise her and won't let her disturb your life. Xinling's hands began to tremble. Siki Lin Siki. She read the letter 3 times from beginning to end, her mind racing. Lin Jam, Liniki, both with the surname Lin. The letter said, Siki is an innocent child. Lin Siki is Lin Jamin's daughter. But what does this have to do with my mother? Why did Lin Jam write to my mother to apologize? Shiny continued rummaging through the boxes and found another one of her mother's diaries. She flipped to a page that said, Jamon came to see me. He said his wife had given birth to a daughter and they named her Siki. He asked me whether we should tell Guang about us. I said there was no need. It was all in the past. He cried and said the person he owed the most to in this life was me. Xinling's hand went completely stiff. Her mother and Lin Jam had once been involved. Did her father Xin Yuang? No. She continued reading. Guang doesn't know about me and Jam. If he found out, he'd go crazy. I don't love Jamon. I was just confused for a moment. But Jamon has loved me for many years. I know that he got married and had children, but he still couldn't let me go. I feel very guilty, but I don't regret it because the one I love is Guangong, and it always has been. Shiny closed the diary and shut her eyes. There was too much information to take in. Mother had an affair with Lin Jam. Lin Jamin's daughter is Lin Siki, and Lin Siki is the woman who stole her husband. The world is too small. On Monday morning, an uninvited guest arrived at Chini's courtyard home. Lin Jam. He looked to be in his 60s with graying hair and wearing a worn jacket. He stood at the entrance of the courtyard house, his eyes red, holding a bag of fruit. Are you Shinlin? He asked. His voice. Shinlini said, Yes. You are Lin Jamin. Lin Jamin froze for a moment. You know me. Shini opened the door and let him in. The two of them sat down by the stone table in the courtyard. Lin Jim kept his head down, his hands clasped together and resting on his knees like a child who had done something wrong. Linny, he said, I'm here to apologize. Shini poured herself a cup of tea, but did not pour him one. What are you apologizing for? Lin Jam took a deep breath about Siki. I'm sorry. It was my idea for her to go see Senyenha. Shining's hand holding the teacup paused for a moment. What did you say? Lin Jim and raised his head, tears glistening in his eyes. Siki isn't my biological daughter. She's the child my wife had with another man. I raised her for 24 years, but she isn't my own flesh and blood. I hate her mother, hate everyone. He paused, then continued later. I found out you were Wing's daughter. Winging. Do you know Wing was the person I loved most in my life? But she married Shin Wuyong and left me. Shini's pupils contracted slightly. Lin Jam's voice began to tremble. I wanted revenge. Revenge on Shin Wuyong. Revenge on Xiao Wanqing. To get back at everyone who had wronged me. So I had Siki seduce Senyanjo. Make you divorce him. Make you suffer. Shining set down her teacup, her gaze cold as ice. Lin January, you destroyed my 5-year marriage just to get revenge on someone who was already dead. Lin Jamin's tears fell. I know I was wrong. I was crazy. I thought that way I could make Wan Qing regret it in the afterlife. Regret not choosing me in the first place. But I was wrong. I ruined you, and I ruined Siki, too. Shiny stood up her back to Lin Jam. She looked at the old locust tree in the yard, the one her mother had planted with her own hands before she died. Lin Jam, she said, do you know what my mom said before she died? Lin Jam shook his head. Shiny turned around and said, she said that if someone with the surname Lin came looking for me, I shouldn't trust him. He's not a good person. Lin Jamin's face twitched. Shiny walked up to him and looked down at him from above. She said, you're not a good person. But she never said she hated you. Do you know why? Because in her heart, you're not even worth hating. Lin Jam's tears flowed even harder. Shin Linny said that act of revenge destroyed you. Lin Siki wasn't your biological daughter, but she was your daughter. At least your name was written in her household register. You pushed her out as bait, made her seduce a married man. Did you ever think about what she would become? Lin Jamin covered his face and burst into tears. Shiny took a deep breath. Lin Jamin, I'm giving you 2 choices. First, turn yourself into the Public Security Bureau and explain clearly how you instigated Lin Siki to destroy someone else's marriage. Second, I'll call the police and have both you and Lin Siki send in together. Lin Jamin looked up. Linny, you can't do this. After all, I'm the man your mother once loved. Shiny laughed, her smile cold to the bone. Did my mom ever love you? My mom wrote in her diary that she didn't love you, that she was only confused for a moment. You ruined my marriage, ruined 5 years of my youth, for someone who didn't love you. Lin Janman, you're not detestable. You're pathetic. Lin Janman slumped on the stone bench, tears streaming down his face. Shiny picked up her phone and dialed a number. Hello, is this the Public Security Bureau? I want to report a crime. Lin Jamin suddenly stood up and rushed over to snatch her phone. Shiny had been on guard and stepped back 2 paces, causing Lin Jam to fall flat on his face. He lay on the ground, crying out, Linny, you can't do this. I'm your mother's lover. You can't treat me like this. Shinlingi hung up the phone and looked at Lin Jamin, who was lying on the ground. Lin Jamin, you're not my mother's lover. You're just an obsessed old man who, for the sake of a woman, he could never have ruined himself and everyone else. She turned and walked into the room, closing the door. Outside the door came Lin Jams, crying exactly the same as San Yanja's crying. Shin Lin leaned against the door panel and looked up at the ceiling. She thought, why are the men in this world all so ridiculous? They think they are very important, that their love is very important, that their hate is very important, but in a woman's eyes, they amount to nothing. Chapter 10. A satisfying ending. 3 months later, the court's verdict came down. Sin Zhou was sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended for 2 years for tampering with medical records and forging medical documents. He also had to pay compensation totaling 1.2 million yuan to 2 patients and an additional 800,000 yuan in liquidated damages to the hospital. He couldn't come up with that much money. His father's company had already been taken over by Shininji, and his monthly salary was just enough to cover the bank's interest. His mother, Jean Lanji's pension was not much, barely enough to support her own living expenses. Sei Yanzhou sold off all the assets under his name, including the Audi, several luxury watches, and the Chanel coat Linsiki had worn before. He listed it on a second-hand platform and sold it for 800 yuan. He managed to scrape together 500,000 yuan, but it still wasn't enough. In the end, it was his father, Sufu, who sold the house back in their hometown and raised the remaining money. On the day the house ownership was transferred, Song Bufu stood at the entrance of the property transaction center, looking at the old house he had lived in for 30 years, tears streaming down his face. Sei Yanzhou stood beside him, unable to say a word. He knew that all of this was caused by him. If he hadn't cheated, if he hadn't divorced Shininji, if he hadn't been so greedy. But life has no if. Linsiki's sentence was even harsher. She was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison to be served as actual time without probation for allegedly forging medical documents. Colluding and cheating and attempting to frame others, she did not appeal because she could not afford a lawyer. Her mother severed ties with her, and Lin Jianman was also sent to the detention center. He was detained for 30 days on charges of instigation and after being released, his whereabouts became unknown. On the day Linsiki was sent to prison, she stood before the iron gate and looked back once. Outside were blue skies, white clouds, and bright sunlight. She thought back to a year ago when she had just graduated from medical school, wearing a white coat and interning at the hospital, and everyone praised her for being smart, beautiful, and promising. At that time, she had 2 choices: work hard and earn her medical license on her own merit, or take a shortcut, seduce a promising male doctor and rely on a man to get ahead. She chose the second path. Now she regretted it, but it was too late for regrets. Xiao Xiuan became the head of general surgery and was also named the year's outstanding doctor. His photo was hung on the hospital lobby's honor roll. Smiling brightly, Wang Jiang was kicked out by his wife, Vice Director Li, with nothing, left with no property at all. The illegitimate child he had with Lin Seiki was sent back to his hometown by Vice Director Li and is being raised by Wang Jianghua's parents. Wang Jiang now works at a private hospital, and his monthly salary is just enough to cover the rent. His new girlfriend is a divorced nurse, 2 years younger than him, but she looks 10 years older. Shining Sawin had been converted into an upscale private gynecology and obstetrics clinic. She was both the owner and the only doctor seeing patients there. On the first day the clinic opened, many guests came. There were Shinlani's former colleagues, her patients, and her classmates from medical school, including Professor Zhang. Professor Zhang brought a bottle of red wine to congratulate her, and when he clinked glasses with Shininji, he said softly, "Linny, you really didn't hold back." Shinli smiled. "Brutal. I think it was just right." Professor Zhang shook his head. "Song Yanha is finished for life." Shinling took a sip of wine and said, He brought it on himself. The clinic was located in a Sahuan courtyard, decorated in an antique style, but all of the equipment was imported. Shining spent 2 million yuan on a 4-dimensional color ultrasound machine and hired 2 nurses and a receptionist. In the 3rd week after opening, a special patient came in. She was an advanced age, pregnant woman, 42 years old, expecting her 2nd child. She had previously had prenatal checkups at a top-tier hospital, but there were too many people there, and each visit meant waiting in line for half a day. After hearing about Shalini's clinic from a friend, she came to try it out. Shining examined her and found that the fetus was positioned somewhat poorly, so she recommended a caesarean section. The mother to be said with some concern, "Dr. Shin, how are your skills? I heard you used to work in a public hospital." Shinli said with a smile, "Don't worry. I worked in a public hospital for 6 years and performed over 1,000 surgeries without a single accident. Unlike certain people." She didn't say who certain people were, but the mother to be understood because her husband also worked in the medical system and had heard about Senyanjo holding Shini's hand. The mother to be said earnestly, "Dear Shin, I trust you." The surgery was scheduled for Friday morning. Shalini was the lead surgeon, and the anesthesiologist was her longtime partner from the public hospital. The surgery went very smoothly and was over in 40 minutes. The mother gave birth to a boy weighing 8 jin, and his cry was loud and strong. The mother's husband was waiting outside the operating room. Hearing the baby's cry, he burst into tears of joy. He held Shinlin's hand and thanked her more than a dozen times. Shinlini took off her surgical gloves. While washing her hands, she saw her own face in the mirror. She was 32 now, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes and a few strands of white hair. But her eyes were still bright, like in the photos of her mother when she was young. That pair of eyes still held light. She remembered what her mother had said before she died. "Linny, you must live better than Mom did." She had done it. In the afternoon, Shinli went to her mother, Xiao Weining's grave. She bought a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and placed it in front of the tombstone. "Mom," she said softly, "I sent Lin Jiamon in. He's not a good person. You were right." The wind blew by, stirring the petals of the white chrysanthemums. "Mom, I turned our home into a clinic. I'm the boss now, and I don't have to answer to anyone else's whims anymore. Don't worry." She crouched down and touched her mother's photo on the tombstone. "Mom, I got divorced. That man wasn't any good. He got involved with Lin Jiamon's daughter, but it's fine. I dealt with him." She stood up and brushed the dust off her dress. "Mom, I'm leaving. I'll come see you again next time." She turned and walked out of the cemetery, sunlight falling on her. A white BMW was parked at the entrance. It was her new car. She got in, started the engine, and the car slowly drove out of the cemetery. Her phone rang. It was the clinic receptionist calling. "Dr. Shin, there's another prenatal checkup appointment this afternoon. Please don't be late." Shiny smiled and said, "Got it. I'll be there right away." She hung up the phone and rolled down the car window, letting the wind lift her hair in the rear view mirror. The cemetery grew farther and farther away, smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared beyond the horizon. Shinlini stepped on the accelerator and the car drove onto the main road. Ahead was a wide street lined with shade trees on both sides. The sunlight bleached the road pale, making it look like a golden river. Shinli felt that her life had finally started over. No Senyanjo, no Linsiki, no more of those melodramatic entanglements. Only herself, her clinic, and her future. She thought for the rest of her life. She would never again stay up late writing a paper for any man. The end.